Kia ora and welcome to the second part of Setting Up Our Systems for the Future session. My name is Jan Burberry and I have my own little consultancy called Jan Burberry Associates. This session will have 3 panel sessions and 6 short presentations. I'm acting as a mistress of ceremonies, I guess, MC, jumping in and out, but I think the MC will stand for mad cow by the end of the 13 times I've jumped in and out. Anyway, you'll have chance for questions and answers, not after the presenters, but you'll be able to have some of your questions answered at the end of the presentation, and don't forget to post your questions through. Before I introduce the facilitator for the first panel discussion, we'll have a short video from one of our sponsors, very important, our sponsors. This is the 3R Group.
Kia ora everyone, we're coming to you from the Wasteman's Summit Hawke's Bay Hub. It's been a progressive year for stewardship with the declaration of 6 priority products. Our team have been busy and their updates follow. With a review of regulation, including the Waste Minimisation Act, the Litter Act and hopefully the Resource Management Act commencing this year, working together as an industry organisation will become more important.
There's 4 highlights for the Glass Packaging Forum for this year. That is glass from the South Island increasing, that is diversity of funding applications, that is also looking at councils adopting separate glass collections, and finally Kerry Spears joining the team.
3R Group is contracted to manage the marketing and communications functions for the Packaging Forum and the Glass Packaging Forum. The work that we do for them includes things like media relations, website and social media management, member and consumer engagement, and we also support the CEO, the board and their steering committees in their advocacy functions on behalf of their members.
3R Group is actively involved in solutions for the automotive industry. One of these solutions is for waste lubricant packaging, a traditionally difficult product to manage. The scheme is near finish and will have a positive environmental impact once completed.
3R's Chem Collect program is a nationwide collection and disposal service for hazardous waste offered to the commercial and domestic sectors. MyHaz waste events are complementary to this service and run in conjunction with councils. They are an easy and effective way for councils to remove hazardous waste from households and at the same time informing the public of current take-back programs for additional waste streams.
Data is key to the rigour of our projects and programs. We've built cost-benefit analysis for both tyres and refrigerants to help inform the declaration of these priority products. We are also working hard to get the best possible data for the glass mass balance. This is critical to inform policy.
That's it from us. If we can assist you with anything, please make contact. Enjoy the summit.
Thanks to 3R. I'd now like to welcome Alice Grace, who's on my left, possibly not in picture at the moment. She's a director at Morrison Lowe Associates and will be facilitating this first panel discussion where local authority leaders are sharing their experience and knowledge about the current issues affecting everyone, or many people, from the coalface. I wonder whether we should have a different name now for coalface, but anyway, welcome Alice.
Excellent, so thank you Jan. Please remember everyone to put your questions into the live chat, so people may be able to answer questions at the end. But also the other option is that the panellists may also be able to answer your questions as you're going through or at the end. So today we have representatives from 4 councils that Morrison Low have been working with this year. All 4 are on a journey to transform their community's waste services. They span the length of the country and they represent large and small councils. Morrison Low have had the pleasure of working with them at different stages in their journeys, from their WMP development to business cases and service delivery reviews, and then on through community consultation and council decision making processes, and then on and into procurement. Procurement has definitely been a challenge this year. Lockdowns and international travel certainly have required a bit of rethink around how we run these processes, but we've got there. So 2 of the councils that are going to be speaking today have been involved in joint procurement processes with some of their neighbouring councils, so they'll be able to speak about their experiences in that. But all 4 have regional collaboration groups that they are part of. So for today's session, the 4 panellists will give an overview of what they've been doing, and then we're going to just run through a few questions and answers from the group. And these will just focus on some of the key service changes that have been taking place. There'll be then a bit of time to answer some of the questions as they come through on the panel. I'd now like to start with by handing over to the 4 panellists, and we're going to work through from the bottom of the south through to the top. So if we can just go in order, we've got Chris and then Angie and then Joern and then Kathryn. Handing over to you about what you've been up to.
Hi. So basically, at the moment we've had a contract in place for 10 years, which is pretty much just doing standard curbside, consisting of plastic rubbish bags, fortnightly alternating collection of mixed recycling and green waste, glass actually being colour sorted at the curbside. We do nightly collections in the CBD for rubbish bags. We do a twice weekly cardboard collection service, and we provide community recycling hubs, which also includes rural transfer stations and pop-up recycling hubs, and obviously look after an active landfill and closed landfills as well. What we've been proposing, we've had pre-engagement with the community for going to a waste bin service and a FOGO collection for organic waste. That's in addition to establishing a new landfill facility and actually establishing organics processing facilities, construction, demolition, sorting facility, and bulk waste transfer system, as well as hopefully an enhanced material recovery facility. So it's basically trying to take a system that was put in place over 10 years ago and trying to update it to meet the current needs and desires and outcomes that the community want to see. That's pretty much me. Hand over, actually.
I'll take over from there. So I'm Angie. Just thanks to Helen and Alice and the team at Morrison Low for having me on here today. So Mackenzie is obviously a smaller council. We have a low population, small towns that are quite spread out over a large area, and we've also got the influence of high tourism. We have a really reliable system in place for waste that we've had in place for about 9 years now. We've got a 3-bin curbside service, a red bin, yellow mixed recycling, and a separate glass collection. We've also got 3 resource recovery parks and 3 cleanfill sites, but we don't have any active landfills in the district. And looking to the future, I guess, and considering how we can improve our services, we've had aspirations of introducing an organics service for quite some time now, as I'm sure a lot of other councils do, and also expanding our waste diversion in general. And leading up to the end of our current contract, which ends in October next year, we had the opportunity of joining in with a joint procurement process with Timaru District Council and Waimate District Council. through the process, each council retained their own individual contract, but we had the benefits of the joint process. So being a small council, there were definitely some cost sharing savings that we had through the process, but there was also increased opportunities, better buying power, and the option of some shared resources as well. One of the key benefits was really opening some doors and extra facilities for us. Being a small council, introducing an organic service is quite an ask. So in our new contract, we have the option of introducing a curbside organic service going through Redruth and Timaru. At the moment, we need to, our next step for us is to get into consultation with our communities, but all going well, getting our communities on board, we're looking to roll that green bin service out in October next year. Thanks.
Right, and I'll take it from there. My name's Joern. I'm the Manager of Sustainability here at Hutt City Council. Lower Hutt is just across the harbour from Wellington. For those that are not familiar with where it is, 7th largest city in New Zealand, about 105,000 people. So we've had, since the 1990s, Lower Hutt has had curbside recycling, and it's been using a commingled curbside sorted crate. And for many years, there've been a range of litter issues. In fact, I came across a solid waste management plan from 1998 that alluded to those litter issues, and yeah, 20 years later, we still have them. So we also currently offer a council-run bag collection service. So residents purchase those bags at various outlets, and that's about 30% of the market that use that. And that's complemented by other people using a private bin service. So we did a review of our services over the last couple of years, and key decisions were made by council in September, 15th of September, and Lower Hutt will change to recycling collection using wheelie bins for mixed recycling and a crate curbside sorted for glass from July 2021. For rubbish, we will move to a weekly rates-funded rubbish collection service where households are able to choose their preferred bin size prior to rollout. And then we will also introduce an optional 4-weekly green waste service. A key driver for the change has been to address those litter issues, which have been very visible, to put it mildly, especially on windy days. Anyone that's been to Wellington will know about the wind. Address some health and safety concerns regarding the bag collection, and also the need to mitigate contamination risk for the new recycling service when we actually change over. So the and another factor for rubbish collection has been the lack of access of some residents to curbside rubbish collection, which is something that came through from Regional Public Health and Kaingora. So yeah, that's just a brief overview for Hutt City Council.
Hi, I'm Kathryn here from Tauranga City Council. So at the moment, Tauranga City Council, we have a user pay system, which has been in place since 1994. We have a council-led curbside collection bag, which is a weekly service, and we have about a 20 to 25% participation rate for that. And we also have a council-led ratepayer glass collection service, which commenced in October 2018. In 2016, Council went out and consulted with the community about the waste services, whether to bring them in-house or to leave it in the private sector. Why we did that is our waste per capita is pretty bad in Tauranga. We send approximately 200 kgs per capita compared to other councils that have a council-led curbside collection. A good example would be Christchurch. They send about 100 kgs per capita. So we identified that we have not a good waste footprint, and we also identified that approximately 70% of the waste, when we do our waste analysis through our swap analysis, can be diverted. So from that, we went out for an RFP, and it was a joint RFP with Western Bay of Plenty, even though the two contracts could be standalone. If one council decided to move ahead and the other didn't. Tauranga City Council's got about 58,000 households, and Western Bay is about 20,000 households. So again, the motivation was to minimise waste to landfill, and the service, when we went out, we were asked, it was a request for a proposal, so we were asking the market the best way to minimise waste to landfill, and that covered everything from POAT, from multiple bin options, from food waste, green waste and recycling. And we have decided on commencing 1st of July next year, Council will move to a fortnightly rubbish collection, a weekly food scrap collection, an opt-in green waste collection, fortnightly glass and recycling, and that'll start 1st of July next year.
Very good. All right, so we'll get into a few questions. The first one is around the introduction of wheelie bins for refuse. So with this one, I'm going to get Joern and then Kathryn to answer. And for me, are you able to share with those who are attending what you have seen as the biggest challenge with the approach you've taken? So Joern and then Kathryn.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the key issue for us has really been the change itself. We've had a system that's been in place for so long, and there hasn't really been any review of that practice for quite some time. So the change from council bags to wheelie bins is really the methodology shift, and also the shift from a mixed approach where about 70% of the market is serviced by private wheelie bin providers, and 30% is made up through council bags, and changing that to a rates-funded approach. So they're both two big changes, and I guess change itself is never easy. There will always be people that disagree with the preferred, with the decision that council has made. So in making the decision, our council really needed to balance a range of objectives, including protecting the community and environment from the harmful effects of waste, reducing carbon emissions, providing services that are cost effective, providing services that are safe, and also providing services that the community wants and can use appropriately. And obviously there's no option that will score highest marks on all of them, and certainly people have different views on how different options rank against these. But regardless of the decision, at the moment, we're aiming for a 1st July 2021 start date, and we'll have to work through and use all our channels and comms to communicate that change and help the community make it.
Yeah, and similar to Bjorn, ours is that behaviour change as well. Obviously, we're in the same situation that we've had a user-paid service since 1994, and we're now going to move to a fortnightly rubbish collection and a new service with the food scraps. So it's getting people to go, they're not going to have any less in capacity, but they're going to have to separate those waste streams out with the motivation to minimise waste and landfill. So that will be a huge community change, and just, I suppose, holding the community's hand going through that process, and making it accessible and convenient to everyone. That will be the biggest challenge that we see.
And Kathryn. So the next one, a lot of the councils that we've been working with are introducing organic collection services, and this time I'm actually going to get Chris and Kathryn to respond, because what you've got is actually the two councils are looking at different collection systems for organic material. So Chris, I'm going to get you to speak first, and then Kathryn.
Thanks. So so basically we had a couple of drivers. It was dissatisfaction. So we're bringing in start from the beginning, we're bringing in a FOGO collection, mixed food waste and organic collection. This is basically based on the levels of dissatisfaction from residents, and primarily also a need to update our WMP and our council actually catching us napping by declaring carbon neutral by 2030 goal, which we weren't expecting. So we've been desperately hunting for ways to actually reduce carbon impacts from council. We've launched into a proper business case process, which obviously, which recommended food waste only collections. But when we went to stakeholder groups and went to engagement on that, there was a massive sort of kickback, basically desire for green waste to be collected as well. And a lot of that seems to be based around, well, that's what they do in Christchurch, which is slightly unfortunate for us. The biggest risk really for us in that is probably the fact that it leaves our inner city residents and our 20,000 students, obviously Dunedin having a very large student population, the green waste collection is absolutely no use to them whatsoever, and they don't have anywhere to put green waste bins, etc. With that in mind, we're actually still trying to bring, following Tauranga's example, to bring a food waste collection with optional green waste, trying to bring that on the table for our long-term plan. So even though we've actually already been for engagement, we're still trying to bring in an alternative version for that.
In Tauranga, so we've introduced a weekly food waste collection, and then, as Chris has just said, the opt-in green waste service. And why we chose an opt-in green waste service is that we identify that not all the community have green waste, such as apartments, or some people might have a house gardening service that take away their garden waste. So that's why we've offered the opt-in. And with the food waste, that's a weekly service, and most households generate food waste. Where we want to, what we also specifically targeted was the volume. In our waste composition, our swap analysis, food waste represents 32% and garden waste represents 11%. So again, we were targeting separate waste streams, because what we found also in our research is that when you separate the two waste streams out, you actually get a higher percentage of food waste recovery. If you're combining the two services, we found that there's not always been a high participation of food waste, and that's a higher waste composition. So we really wanted to target that. And also it was about future-proofing the service for in-markets. So we just found that if we separated food waste from green waste, it meant that if there would be a market, in-market, just for food waste or just for green waste, then we would have both options. But if we wanted to combine the two, then we would have that as well. Whereas if we combine them right from the beginning, that would limit our markets at the end if we were to change the service.
Very good. So the third question is around the standardising of services. And this one we've got Angie and Joern are going to answer. So Angie, then Joern. How would the standardisation of collections help you with the delivery of your waste services? For example, being able to communicate about what's being recycled, and also what might be the challenges with implementing standardisation. So handing over to you, Angie.
Yeah, well, being a small area, we have found after COVID, if there's anything that good can come out of COVID, there's some learnings that we've had, and our resident population are actually really good at recycling. It's the influences that we get coming from the outside, all the holiday home owners, the Airbnbs, the tourist sector, that we struggle with contamination. So that standardising will really benefit in terms of reducing our contamination levels. One thing we've had through the joint procurement process is that Timaru and Waimate will have similar curbside to us. So that's a red bin, a mixed yellow recycling bin, and separate glass. Glass has been a really key thing for us. A lot of our holiday home owners are from Timaru or from Christchurch, so I'd love Christchurch to go separate glass as well. But having that same thing going on, we're able to communicate that a whole lot better. We're also going to have some options around messaging on trucks and shared educators through the 3 districts. So just that collaboration and standardising at a regional level is great. But if that standardisation can go wider nationally, that will continue to bring benefits for us.
Yeah, and so in terms of standardising services for Lower Hutt, one of the key drivers has really been access. So you actually get some properties that literally do not use a rubbish collection service, either because they can't afford it or because they don't have access to it. So the change to a rates-funded system will enable that to be remedied. And the other thing is that with the current setup where you have various providers ploughing every street 3 to 4 times a week, you get quite large inefficiencies. So changing to a rates-funded system gives you the opportunity to minimise truck movements, consolidate collection days, and also that's a key driver for us from a carbon reduction perspective, is to enable the rollout of electric trucks, and we have that as one of our key criteria in our contract, and I'm very confident that we will end up in that space. So we will see announcements hopefully very soon. And the final one is really around consistent communication. So by offering a range of services, including the optional 4-weekly green waste service, you get the ability to really help residents make good decisions about what to do with different materials. In terms of implementation challenges, probably the key one is time pressure. So we've got till 1st July 2021 to make this all happen, and that's not a lot of time for such a big change.
Very good, and we're up to our last question, and I think we've got about 3 minutes left, so it'll be a brief response. So the last question is just around that enabling broader waste diversion in your district, and I'm going to throw to Chris and then Angie on this one, and it's about how do you see council's role in helping enable that broader diversion in your communities?
All right, I'll keep it brief. Yeah, basically we don't have the scale to actually be able to develop a proper industry down here. Someone like Green Gorilla is unlikely to be able to want to set up down here due to the economics of scale. But we do have some companies doing stuff at smaller scale. So we're taking the approach, trying to work with them. Basically, we'll do the sorting and provide them with a raw material, which gives them some confidence to invest in upscaling a bit.
Yeah, and I mean, similar to that, we've got challenges with scale as well, probably on a different level to yourselves. But also with resources, time, there's so many things that we'd like to do, but there's not the time to do it always. So I guess we're leaning on that collaboration and that group sort of approach, that there's other facilities that we can tag into to build up, and that's going to be our organics option going through Red Roof, but also things like timber pyrolysis that we can also adapt and take advantage of. And glass recycling. At the moment, we send all our glass to a roading company in Twizel to be crushed and used in roading material. But now we have also the option through a collaboration approach to send that to OI through Red Roof. So I think it's, finding other ways to fix the problem rather than trying to do it all ourselves.
Very good, and we have had our 1 minute to the end bell, so we'll finish it up there. Really encourage you on the line to use the live chat to ask questions, but all of the panellists are always more than happy to answer questions after the sessions as well. So thanks very much from me, and I'm going to hand back to Jan.
Thank you, Alice. Thanks also to Angie, Chris. Thanks, Alice. And thanks also to Angie, Chris, Joern and Kathryn. Before the next presenter, a short piece from our member, Platsback.
New Zealand has a growing problem with plastic waste, but products made from plastic waste are part of the solution. Introducing 2 recycled plastic products with a small environmental footprint. Platsback collects and recycles New Zealand plastic farm waste and turns it into new products, like these pest traps. These hard-wearing products are designed to withstand New Zealand conditions. Zickler Road Safety Solutions provide a recycled plastic option to manage traffic. They're customizable and can be retrofitted to existing roadways. Support recycling. Buy recycled products.
Thank you, Platsback. The next presentations might say 6x3, 6 presentations, 3 minutes apiece, all on different aspects of, different products for potential product stewardship. Our first presenter I'd like to welcome is Michael Dudley. Michael is the Senior Policy Manager with Tech Collect New Zealand, and he's talking about product stewardship for e-waste, excluding large batteries. Thank you, Michael.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Michael Dudley, toka wingoa, no Tech Collect NZ. Hello and greetings to all. My name is Michael Dudley from Tech Collect NZ, a not-for-profit organisation established by leading global technology companies investing in the circular future of their products in Aotearoa. While our origins lie in e-waste management, focusing on end-of-life recovery and treatment, we're committed to supporting a more circular economy in New Zealand by managing our e-products and components to achieve their highest value for as long as possible. In July this year, the New Zealand Government declared 6 priority products for the establishment of regulated product stewardship schemes under our Waste Minimisation Act, including electrical and electronic products. This announcement also came with news of grant funding for Tech Collect NZ to expand our e-waste service across Aotearoa and work with industry, government and community stakeholders to co-design regulated scheme options for e-products through a targeted research and consultation process. To commence the co-design approach, we've convened a circular e-stewards network. This network brings together a cross-section of local and global product stewardship experts, New Zealand government, community and industry stakeholders with the goal of developing, refining and recommending regulated scheme options that are fit for purpose in New Zealand. The network will be directed by a central working group who will produce a recommendations report for a preferred model or preferred models by June 2021. The network will also hold 4 engagement workshops to consult on certain issues and opportunities and capture stakeholder feedback and recommendations for proposed scheme design elements. These workshops will take place in early and mid-2021 and will be widely promoted to ensure that all interested parties and potentially impacted groups can actively participate and are well represented. If you're wondering what products might be captured by the term electrical and electronic products, the scope is quite broad and basically covers any device with a plug or battery, including batteries themselves. E-products excluded from our investigations relate to large batteries used in electric vehicles and energy storage. Circular product stewardship design options for these products are being led by our friends at the Battery Industry Group, or BIG Network. To quickly run through some of the key deliverables the Central Working Group are leading, we will undertake stakeholder engagement to understand stakeholder views on the key requirements for a scheme in NZ, research learnings from international approaches informing local scheme design, undertake consumer research to understand consumer beliefs, attitudes and behaviours towards e-product lifecycle management, analyse legal issues that may impact our e-management sector in future, and prepare a recommendations report for the best options by June next year. With our stakeholder engagement activities now underway, I invite and encourage everybody to head to our website and register your interest to participate in our stakeholder surveys and upcoming workshops in the new year. We want to make sure that we leave no stone unturned throughout these investigations, and your valuable input is crucial to achieve this. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you, Michael. Well, it would be appropriate that the next presentation is about large batteries. Very an interesting acronym which I assume our next presenter will be explaining to us, which is BIG. Anyway, our presenter is Juhi Shareef, Sustainability Lead from Vector, and he is talking about a circular product stewardship scheme for large batteries. Thank you, Juhi.
So BIG, the Battery Industry Group, is a real collaboration across sectors, and it came about by Vector really deciding to take the lead in terms of creating a new energy future.
We have to bring together a true diversity, a true set of skill sets that are purposed by one vision for change, but enables that through a sector of work and commitment. And Vector and the BIG is really leading out this work. I've not seen anything like this in any other sector of the world. By the end of the process, we all shared a common vision and an agreement that we need to get on with the program and put in a stewardship program with all the vested interests and vested parties.
It would be great to see a nice sustainable food chain, let's say, of batteries. So when they do finally come to being recycled, they're not dumped, but they are reused and recycled.
Vector's part of the Battery Industry Group because we recognise that with these batteries coming into New Zealand, lithium-ion and also other types, that we actually need to get ahead of the problem of what happens at the end of life.
It's great to see that
The industry leaders from retail, from wholesale, from manufacturing and recycling are all dealing with the problem ahead of time before it becomes a big problem.
I think coordinating between regulatory and legislative bodies to set a framework and then working as an industry to come up with solutions internally and add value within the country and maybe become like a world leader in solving these problems rather than relying on the manufacturers themselves outside of New Zealand.
We need to get ahead of the battery issue because they are a part of our solution to decarbonising the economy. Increasing vehicle ownership of electric vehicles means there'll be more in circulation. We can reuse them for storage, and going to landfill, it just wastes materials.
Product stewardship can be the first step to a circular economy. Rather than just recycling, circular economy is more about how do we keep those materials cycling at a higher value. So product stewardship, if it's designed with circular economy principles at its heart, can really be an effective first step to the circular economy.
I think what I'd really like to see is more of today, more industry specialists getting around the table and going, okay, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to solve this? Because we can.
Thank you very much, Juhi. I have a number of friends who will be very interested in hearing about large batteries, so thanks for that presentation. Our next presenter is Trevor Tutt. Trevor is General Manager Innovation from 3R, and he's going to be presenting on TyreWise, product stewardship for tyres. Thanks very much, Trevor.
Hi there, my name is Trevor Tutt from 3R Group, and I'm here to talk to you today about the impact of priority products on tyres. 3R's purpose is to combine imagination and science to repurpose waste. This is achieved by designing great product stewardship programs which accelerate the circular economy. 3R Group is based in Hawke's Bay and has a national footprint. We have processing facilities in Christchurch and Auckland and typically employ between 25 to 30 people per annum. We run trucks, process recyclable and waste materials. We're a purpose-led business aiming to maximise our environmental and social impact. We specialise in product stewardship and resource recovery, designing and managing programs for products such as packaging, paint, chemicals, child car seats, mattresses, tyres and synthetic refrigerant gases. These include the Packaging Forum, Glass Packaging Forum, Resine Paintwise, Dulux Paint and Packaging Take-Back Program, SeatSmart, Child Car Seat Recycling, Rebound Mattress Recycling, Chem Collect and TyreWise. We offer sustainability services to businesses covering everything from waste minimisation, waste audits and assessments, sustainable packaging advice, hazardous waste, carbon emission measurement and reduction initiatives, and support for one-off sustainability goals. The priority product announcement for end-of-life tyres means a regulated product stewardship scheme will have to be established to ensure all end-of-life tyres are responsibly managed. TyreWise is the co-designed scheme developed by 3R with the tyres industry to address end-of-life tyres and has been recently refreshed from its original incarnation back in 2012 to reflect the current situation today. This work has been completed by 3R, with the resulting product stewardship scheme having been submitted on behalf of industry for accreditation in line with the current priority product regulation guidelines. Now 3R's role with TyreWise continues now in working alongside Crown and agencies and the TyreWise Industry Working Group to continue towards accreditation. As TyreWise is the first scheme going through the accreditation for regulated product stewardship, MFE are currently working to find out how best to use regulations to achieve maximum beneficial outcomes for the scheme. 3R's role with this is to assist wherever we can to ensure that those beneficial outcomes do in fact occur in line with the design of the scheme put forward. As this process is novel, there has not been a script that we've been formed that we can follow. As one of those things being created now that others will be able to follow in the future. At this stage, we're in a hiatus phase where we get closer to implementing the governance and working groups. We'll come back together. I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Trevor. I must say, when I think of tyres, I think of the wonderful use they put to in earthships, for those of us who know the work of some very innovative American architect whose name I've just forgotten offhand. Anyway, sadly, there are too few earthships and too many tyres. Let's hope something will happen with product stewardship. Next presenter, Richard Carroll, Commercial Manager from the Ag Recovery Foundation, and he's presenting on product stewardship for agricultural chemicals and their containers. Thanks, Richard.
Hello, my name's Richard Carroll. I'm the Commercial Manager here at the Ag Recovery Foundation. Ag Recovery has been tasked with undertaking the co-design process with two of the proposed priority products, agrochemicals, and in partnership with Plasback, Farm Plastics. Today I'll be focusing on the agrochemical program, and I'll let Chris Hartshorne from Plasback update you on the Farm Plastics project. Ag Recovery is a not-for-profit charitable trust established in 2006 by the organisation shown on the slide to address persistent on-farm waste issues. We currently run two voluntary product stewardship schemes, being one, an agrochemical container collection scheme which receives and recycles agrochemical containers, and two, an agrochemical recovery scheme which receives and then safely disposes of unwanted residual chemicals. Currently, our voluntary scheme is supported by the following brands, which make up the majority of the agrochemical market. They currently pay a levy of 12 cents per litre on what they sell into the market. The new scheme design has been focused on transparency and fairness, and the proposed levy structure has been further broken out to reflect actual disposal costs for legacy chemicals, as well as recommending different rates for the different size containers. In August 2019, the Ministry released a consultation document for proposed priority products and priority product stewardship scheme guidelines. At that stage, Ag Recovery began work to ensure that the current scheme we operate aligned with these draft guidelines, including having extensive stakeholder engagement and seeking assistance from independent consultants to review the structure and the scope of Ag Recovery's service and levy. The scope envisaged by the Ministry is somewhat wider than our current program, as it also includes veterinary medicines and household pest and weed control products. As these currently have no existing stewardship scheme in place, the Ministry has allowed 3 years for a scheme to be put in place for these products. So for the agrochemical waste stream, Ag Recovery has led the co-design process and has drafted a new service policy which outlines Ag Recovery's service commitments and its targets. We have created a comprehensive report, actually 118 pages long, that outlines the background and work taken and provides a levy matrix showing how it might be applied. This has gone out to stakeholders along with a summary report of 7 pages that encapsulates the key points. These stakeholders have now had the opportunity to be invited to a webinar on the 8th of October that covers off this report and also provides an opportunity for further feedback and questions. The next step after this consultation process will be to seek guidance from the Ministry on regulation to support the stewardship scheme. Ag Recovery is working to have these new levies and schemes in place from 1 July 2021 and to be re-accredited to run the scheme. We envisage that the levy will be reviewed after the first year of operations to ensure that it's been set at an appropriate rate, so a period of refinement to follow the initial rollout is planned. Please feel free to go to our website, agrecovery.co.nz, for more information. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Richard. We're just past halfway, and it's my pleasure to present our next person, Chris Hartshorne, who's the Program Manager from Plasback, and he's presenting on product stewardship for agricultural plastics, so continuing that agricultural theme. Thank you, Chris.
Crop packaging products add significant value to the primary sector by improving feed quality and reducing damage to crops. However, many of these products are single-use plastics and create a disposal problem for farmers and growers when they are no longer needed. If we are going to continue to use these products, New Zealand must have a viable collection and recycling network so these waste plastics can be easily recovered and reused. That is why the Tapex Group started the Plasback scheme in 2005, and in the last 15 years we have collected and recycled over 17,000 tonnes of waste plastics from the primary sector.
Hello, my name is Chris Hartshorne, the Plasback Scheme Manager. Plasback is one of New Zealand's longest running accredited product stewardship schemes, and we operate a nationwide on-farm collection service for farmers and growers for a number of different plastic wastes. We operate 6 purpose-built balers, and as part of match funding from the COVID Response and Recovery Fund, we will together invest in another 3 balers and associated handling equipment to our network before Christmas. This will allow us to process more material more economically, and this will help keep our collection fees low. Plastics in the environment is a cause of great concern with many New Zealanders, and interest in the circular economy has never been greater. It is for those reasons we have introduced products like Tough Board, a root barrier and a builder's film that complete the circular economy and allow us to reuse the plastic we collect. In July, the Minister announced that farm plastics would now be part of a regulated product stewardship scheme. The co-design process for this scheme has only recently commenced and is being managed by AgRecovery. As New Zealand's established on-farm collector, Plasback has a major role to play in this co-design process, and we want to see a scheme that moves seamlessly from a voluntary to a regulated scheme without adding additional costs to the primary sector. We see many challenges ahead, not least finding viable outlets for the increased range of plastics subject to the regulated scheme, but we are committed to growing Plasback and finding a solution for all plastics that are generated on farm. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Chris. Now, our next and final presenter in our 6x3 is John Bowen, who is the Director from Refrigerant Recovery New Zealand. And John, not surprisingly, will be talking about product stewardship for refrigerants and other greenhouse gases. Thank you, John.
Kia ora koutou. I'm John Bowen, and I'm a Director of Refrigerant Recovery New Zealand, a product stewardship scheme that collects and destroys high environmental impact, unwanted and contaminated refrigerants from refrigeration and air conditioning systems. Since we were established in 1993, we have collected and destroyed just under 500,000 kilograms of ozone-depleting and high global warming refrigerants, which has reduced the environmental impact by the equivalent of 1.1 million tonnes of CO2 and saved some 470,000 tonnes of atmospheric ozone. Our scheme, which is an industry-based charitable trust, is currently an accredited product stewardship scheme under the Waste Minimisation Act. However, as it's only a voluntary scheme, it's only supported by around 40% of the current of refrigerant currently crossing the border. So the announcement by Minister Sage that refrigerants have become a priority product will ensure the ongoing success of refrigerant product stewardship in New Zealand and will have substantial environmental benefits. With the assistance of the Waste Minimisation Fund, our industry has recently undertaken a consultation on priority product stewardship or co-regulated product stewardship and has proposed a cradle-to-grave approach which will ensure that the refrigerants are handled and used by properly skilled and knowledgeable people, which will have the benefit of reducing avoidable losses of these refrigerants to the atmosphere. Our scheme will require persons installing, servicing and maintaining appliances and systems containing these priority product refrigerants to be licensed. And this will benefit the purchasing public by raising standards of installation and service and reducing avoidable atmospheric losses. The declaration of refrigerants as a priority product is timely, as under the Kigali Agreement, or amendment, to the Montreal Protocol, New Zealand, along with the rest of the world, is phasing down the use of these high environmental impact refrigerants over the next 20 years. So there will be substantial volumes of redundant refrigerants to be disposed of. Our industry looks forward to establishing a fair, robust and effective priority product stewardship scheme to take the industry forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That ends our short videos, presentations. Before we progress, we have a short presentation from TGM Design, Wasteman's member. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Kimberly Hope. Kimberly is with New Plymouth District Council as the Manager of Resource Recovery. She's going to be facilitating a panel discussion on what an e-waste product stewardship scheme would look like for Aotearoa New Zealand. And I notice on the panel, cannot resist saying hello, Rose Reid. Rose and I worked together at Sustainability Victoria many years ago, or some years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Just a note to please remember to put your questions up for the panellists in the live chat. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end to answer these. I would like to introduce our lovely panellists. They are Michael Dudley, Senior Policy Manager from Tech Collect New Zealand, Juhi Shareef, Sustainability Lead from Vector, and Rose Reid, co-founder of the E-Waste Watch Institute in Australia. So welcome to our panellists, lovely to have you here. So to start with, I thought we would just do a 30-second kind of opening statement from each of you on your hope for an e-waste product stewardship scheme for Aotearoa. So maybe start, Michael, if you could start, and then Juhi follow up, and then finish up with Rose, that would be great. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Kimberly. Look, when it comes to my hopes for an e-waste product stewardship scheme in Aotearoa, I want to see a well-defined and well-understood system of shared responsibility for all e-products, a system that enables and incentivises waste avoidance and product lifecycle extension, one that establishes a level playing field for all groups sharing responsibility, that accurately addresses negative product lifecycle impacts and curbs a linear economy wherever possible. A scheme that creates local employment opportunities and increases onshore reprocessing, rescuing valuable resources for the benefit of our local supply chains, to name but a few. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Go ahead, Juhi.
Hi. Well, basically everything that Michael said, for starters, but I am chair of the battery industry group, fondly called BIG, here in New Zealand, and our role is to basically create a circular product stewardship scheme for large batteries which fall under the umbrella of e-waste. So from our perspective, we are really passionate about first of all, obviously making sure that any e-waste product stewardship scheme can really track its chain of custody, through often very complex ownership systems, and at the end of life, and all the value is extracted out of that, all of those very valuable materials, and at end of life that they're properly recycled. Understanding that recycling is often downcycling, and what we really want to do is try to maintain the value of those products and materials as long as possible in a circular economy system. So we'll be talking a bit more about that as we go, but really what we're looking for is a clear, well-communicated scheme that levels the playing field and that really ensures that we extract as much value as possible out of those valuable materials.
Go ahead, Rose.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yes, I'm with E-Waste Watch Institute, and we're a not-for-profit research-based entity, and our focus really is on about accelerating electronic sustainability both in Australia and New Zealand. Really excited to see the progress being made now on e-waste. It's had a few false starts, and both Juhi and Michael have touched on the core elements of a good product stewardship scheme. From an E-Waste Watch perspective, what we'd really love to see is New Zealand take the lead on including elements of design, repair and reuse in the scheme. It's not an easy thing to do, but obviously getting the basics up and running, getting the collection networks, getting the producers, manufacturers, those putting products on the market are contributing and actively engaged and working with local councils in the community to extend the life of products, to keep them active, to optimise the value return, but and also to ensure that everything is that can no longer be used is recycled in a safe and responsible manner.
Thank you very much, Rose. So we thought that kind of leads on to the first kind of question I've got for the panel. How do we get the circular approach into a product stewardship e-waste scheme? Maybe Juhi, if you could answer first on that question, that would be great.
Yeah, no, and look, it's a great question because it's something that I've noticed that when we're talking about product stewardship, people just often assume that it's going to be part of a circular economy. And that's not always the case. Product stewardship can be a first step if you make sure that you have the principles of a circular economy embedded from the outset. So something that we've done at the Battery Industry Group is actually we did a lot of research into the volumes and trends and the chemistries of the batteries that are going to be coming our way, the large batteries, I should say, from EVs and stationary storage. And we then did some work to envisage what a circular future would look like. So we did 3 different scenarios based in 2030. And then kind of for us to reach, how do we ensure that the stakeholders kind of can collect the product and then recycle it? And so I think that that's a really important distinction to make. So having a vision for what that circular ecosystem is important, because it means that you are then designing for the future. You're not designing based on a past kind of linear system. And often those players and the system doesn't yet exist. So the way that you develop that product stewardship scheme is in a really systemic way. And for batteries, that's the nexus of the energy industry, the waste industry, the transport industry, as well as battery manufacturers as well, obviously. So it's a really fascinating space.
Great, thank you. Rose, can you add to that? What's your thoughts on getting the circular approach in?
Yeah, I think Juhi's point about having a systemic approach is really important, and systemic design is really key. What's really challenging is that companies, to help move companies to take that curve and move away from the linear and into circular, is to incentivize them and reward them for making their products more durable, so that those products will instead of it being only used for 2 or 3 years, will be used for 5 years. So this could be looking at, giving them support in terms of innovating design, making software interchangeable and so on. There's a whole range of things. Similarly, recycled content. How can we reward companies who are putting recycled plastics into their products, replacing virgins with recovered materials? And then also importantly, how can we reward those companies to do local repair work, both doing it themselves and also providing the community, those people that do want to do the repair themselves? How can they collect and harvest parts and make those available and keep them active? It's a really quite a challenging and complex area of repair, but it can actually be, revisited. And we need to look at new systems to do that, to make it affordable and to make it safe.
Great, thanks, Rose. We might just head to the next question just because we are running a bit short of time. So, Michael, we'll start with you for this one. How can collaboration be encouraged between organisations who are traditionally competitors, and how can councils have a partnership with the scheme?
Thanks, Kimberly. So, look, what I'll say is, at its core, product stewardship is the principle that we need to share responsibility to address negative product lifecycle impacts to the environment, to human health, and work together to find better ways of managing and retaining our valuable materials. This is going to require a partnership approach across government, industry, community, and consumers, and of course, collaboration is key. When it comes to councils, they're already providing these services to their communities, and they're an integral component of our e-waste management system in Aotearoa. A mandatory scheme for e-products needs to consider how those looking to access a service have reasonable access, and councils, along with social enterprises and other dedicated services, will play a key role in achieving this reasonable access for all Kiwis. Through our targeted stakeholder surveys mentioned in the short video played before this panel, we want to hear from every council across the country on how they see a scheme partnership approach working on the ground and in operation. And we're fortunate enough to have the benefit of a council representative on our working group who will bring these types of issues and opportunities to the TAO Forum, the Territorial Authorities Officers Forum, to capture their feedback and recommendations on various points like this as we run through these investigations.
Thanks, Michael. Juhi, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would. So again, from the perspective of BIG, the Battery Industry Group, we're now a collaboration of over 140 businesses and individuals. And look, it is not always easy. It's great. Businesses love talking about collaboration and partnership and stuff, but when you actually get down to it, it can be really challenging, particularly when you've got different OEMs or, car companies sitting around a table who are very competitive out in the market. And the way in which we have, being able to bring everyone together and actually strive for a common goal is because we operate in a kind of pre-competitive space, right? These are common challenges that we're facing. And it is absolutely impossible for any one business at the expense of others when you're talking about systemic change, right? It's obviously it's not going to work. And so it's been a really fascinating journey to see that actually once people's their concerns have been allayed, and you have to have very clear terms of reference and very clear governance, strong governance, at that point people are absolutely willing to sit down and collaborate and talk about really knotty, messy problems and how we're going to work together to achieve them. And so it's not always easy, but it's what we absolutely need to do.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking on how much time we've got left. I think we are a bit limited for time, so I'll maybe just have one more quick question for Rose. What can we learn from international approaches towards e-product stewardship to ensure we have the best system in New Zealand?
Well, there's lots of good learnings out there to draw on. Within Australia, the NTCRS. A couple of key things: defining local council roles and having that collaboration between the businesses, producers and councils is really important, because at the moment, you have a system which is driven by councils, the national government and waste and recycling services. Now you've got a whole new group of players coming on board who have who are going to have a legal responsibility as well. So trying to set up a governance system that works well, that incorporates and recognises what each of those organisations has the capacity to do, and what it doesn't have to do, because I think that sometimes there's some unfair expectations placed. And so getting that out on the table early is really important. And I think that was a key thing, I think, to learn from it. And then the other thing is starting to have a look at what's happening over in Europe in terms of what are the incentives being used to drive better design, to drive repairability. The right to repair legislation being pushed is quite threatening to a lot of companies. So we need to look at it in a more proactive and productive manner. Some people do like to do their own repair, but there's a lot of people that don't. They would much prefer to be able to walk down the street and give it to someone to be repaired and pick it up and know that it's all safely done, because they don't have it. So I think we need to get that repair conversation going well. Repair has to come back. It's really been pulled away because of costs. So we need to help companies need to sit down and think creatively about how they can work with local councils and communities to come up with better repair options that don't compromise the integrity of these very complex products, whether it's batteries. And there's huge opportunities to reuse, repurpose, and to upcycle and continue the life of, these great products.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rose. Michael, do you have anything to add around international approaches?
Oh, look, I think Rose really hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot of examples that we can look at for our jurisdictional partners, different extended producer responsibility programs, the National Television and Computer Recycling Scheme in Australia. But I think there's much we can learn. Although there's much we can learn, there's also a fantastic opportunity that's presented in front of us, and that's the opportunity to do better, to go further and do more and become that model that other jurisdictions look towards as they consider their product stewardship future for these products in their local regions. Any examples that we look at internationally have to be checked in the local context as well to see that it is fit for purpose in New Zealand, and we're very fortunate to have so many examples available. We're members of a national product responsibility organisation through the WE Forum, who are also represented on our working group, and we'll be running a targeted workshop with e-product PROs across the globe in November this year to learn what's worked well, what hasn't, what is critical to include to spur more circular management of these products across their life cycle, like the many points that Rose just mentioned. So it's fantastic, but of course we need to look at it in the local context of what's going to work best in our backyard.
Just one other point I wanted to add, Kimberly, is getting the scope right is really important, and I suppose that's been a bit of a shortcoming in Australia with the NTCRS, is that it did limit to TVs, computers, printers and computer accessories. And, this space evolves very quickly, and there are a whole lot of other products that need to be included, and because from a community perspective, it's a bit confusing as to what's in and what's out. So I think the broad approach of scope and defining that is really important. And it's great to see the integration with batteries, because the scheme itself for batteries may be different because how they're used and managed is different to, say, electronic products. But I think that integration is really important as well.
Thank you so much, guys. That's been a really interesting discussion. I really just like to take the opportunity to thank you all for spending the time addressing these questions. And I think we are probably just about up for time, unless anyone has some very last words they wanted to talk about.
I was just going to say one final thing, which is the one thing I'm really excited about is the potential for having kind of micro solutions across communities, across Aotearoa. It doesn't just mean that big businesses are going to be doing this. This is going to involve communities, and I'm really excited about the potential for everyone to get involved.
Awesome work. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're ready to go back to Jan.
Thank you, Kimberly. And thanks also to Michael, Juhi and Rose. There'll now be a panel discussion, which Kimberly will also facilitate. Thanks, Kimberly. And that will be discussing what a product stewardship scheme will look like here for plastic packaging.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Jan. I'd like to introduce our next set of panellists. So we've got Hannah Blumhart, from the coordinator of the New Zealand Product Stewardship Council, Rachel Barker, Plastics New Zealand CEO, and Kelly McLean, Sustainable Packaging Product Manager from Foodstuffs. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. So I guess the plastic packaging product stewardship scheme is one that the co-design process hasn't yet started, so the framework and the approach and who will lead it has not been set up. So I guess the questions that we have for you guys is slightly different. The scope is quite wide as well. So I thought we'd just start with an opening statement from each of you around your perspective on a plastic packaging scheme. So perhaps we could start with Hannah.
Yeah, sure. Kia ora. So I think it's important to think about what the issue is that we're trying to fix. Packaging does fulfill an important purpose, but at the moment our system is overly complex, fragmented, relies on virgin plastic resin and single-use linear approaches that fuel climate change and plastic pollution. So product stewardship really needs to address these issues, and that's going to require government oversight, regulation, but also a clear-eyed focus on the waste hierarchy. So such a scheme would start with reducing the amount of packaging units in our economy as a whole, really increasing reusable packaging, and for disposable packaging that remains, really getting those mandatory return collection systems up so that those can be then recycled back into packaging onshore.
Awesome, thanks very much. Rachel, could you give us a wee 30 seconds? Please.
Sure. So our perspective is slightly different. We really support the use of product stewardship as a tool in tackling certain waste streams. But our stance is that this declaration should have been on all single-use packaging, not just plastic packaging. While that would have made the scope even bigger than it is, it also would have helped avert the unintended environmental harms that we see arising from focusing only on plastics, particularly in regard to climate impacts. So we'd like to see the remainder of single-use packaging included as soon as possible.
Thanks, Rachel. Kelly, would you like to provide your perspective?
Sure thing. So, so we have a program of addressing the packaging at Foodstuffs, so we're working towards reusable, recyclable and compostable packaging commitments. And part of this is also supporting the transition to a circular economy. And as a large retailer, we are part of Kiwis' everyday lives. So we do have a role to play in creating demand for recycled content and closing the loop. And the plastic stewardship scheme plays a role in that. And I think one thing I'd really like to see is that user experience front and centre. So how Kiwis every day will access a scheme and what that looks like for them.
Awesome, thanks so much. So just going on to the first question now. So Rachel, we'll probably start with you with this one, but how or who should lead the co-design process for the scheme and the implementation?
So for efficiency reasons, I think we'd like to see this one industry-led, but it needs to also be led by a party that can be objective. So, no commercial interests in it, so no competing interests or issues under the Commerce Act, particularly around data transfer between parties. So, we need to be very careful in terms of that one. Also, given the broad scope of plastic packaging, we need to be really careful about who's actually at the table and then who's involved in the wider consultation process. We're not just talking FMCG here, it's retail, it's wholesale across almost every sector in New Zealand. So, one thing that's really key to the whole co-design process is actually ensuring that there's mechanisms in place to collect and analyse the feedback from all sectors. For practical reasons, there'll only be a certain number of people sort of at the table. But, we really need a clear and transparent way to consult, receive feedback from all of those impacted and have a real transparent system in place there. And then that helps gain that buy-in over the longer term. And it needs to be all steps in the system as well. So, your producers, users, collectors, aggregators, reprocessors, and even exporters in some cases.
Awesome, thanks very much. Kelly, how and who would you like to see leading the co-design process?
So I think it does need to be independently managed. That transparency is incredibly important around what's discussed and how to navigate really tricky problems. But I think the data as well that sits behind it is really important, and having an evidence base as well, and being able to share that across a whole range of stakeholders as well is really important too. But that clear terms of reference, so we just heard from the last panel, setting up the scope is incredibly important, and that should also help sort of those who are going to be managing this very complex process, navigate and engage with the various stakeholders across supply chains and the waste sector and all sorts of different areas.
Thanks, Kelly. Hannah, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think from the New Zealand Product Stewardship Council perspective, I think there is a little bit of a lack of clarity in this co-design process about who is leading, and we're a bit concerned about that. We think it's really important that this product stewardship scheme, the co-design, is led by government with government oversight. We don't think that it should be left to industry. Of course, industry, retailers must be at the table, but in terms of leading it, that oversight should come from government, particularly if we want to achieve an ambitious scheme that's really looking at reduction targets. That's not necessarily completely aligned with industry interests. So we need to be thinking bigger. How are we going to bring wider interests to the table? Because the impact of plastic packaging goes into environmental impact, community impact. So we need to have those voices at the design table and ensure that that's independent and fair.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Just moving on to our next question now, just around the scope of this particular scheme. How do you turn the scope into bite-sized pieces, and what products should we focus on first? So maybe Kelly, if you could go first on this one.
Gosh, I always get a bit worried about it being sort of perceived as one scheme, because I think there's so many different parts that would have to be addressed. You'd, I guess, look at some of the easier areas to address. So, we know that types 1, 2, and 5 have pretty good markets, so that could probably be carved off. And then soft plastics is another area. We've also got the type 7s. How do you deal with that? So, we actually do need to work through a co-design process incredibly carefully to be able to sort of pick off the different parts of the system involved with plastic packaging. But I think that co-design process is going to be so important. So hopefully that scope can be open to different resin types, and it's appropriate.
Awesome. Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Kelly in that we're going to end up with sort of multiple streams under, one big umbrella with this one. But I would rather we didn't focus on the easy to handle ones first, like the 1s, 2s and 5s, because I think doing that actually disincentivises their use. We'd actually prefer a target after the problematic materials. So, the ones that can't be recycled here in New Zealand, in some cases anywhere in the world pretty much, and also those without adequate collection and infrastructure to actually handle onshore. By focusing on those first, then we actually incentivise producers to change product designs, packaging designs, that sort of thing, and actually move towards more sustainable solutions. Ideally that would be with a life cycle approach to ensure that the new packaging is better from a whole of life point of view. Rather than just that end of life piece, and it's also important to ensure the environmental costs that are incurred if the packaging fails. We need to make sure that we're not losing the energy and water and everything else that's gone into actually growing or making that product just because the packaging itself isn't fully adequate.
Hannah, would you like to add any more to that?
Yeah, I think this question about, where are the bite-sized chunks and what products to focus on first, I think that's more of a question for industry, to be honest. And from a policy perspective, what we really want is to see government pulling some of those big levers that creates a sort of reset, and then that sort of the industry then works it out beyond within that. So, for example, we'd just like to see across the board binding reduction targets, some of that maybe fees on single-use items, some deposit return systems in there, and some mandatory recycled content. And and you might have material recycling fees for those harder to recycle items, and then the industry can kind of work out how to work within those new settings. And to go to Rachel's point about focusing on hard to recycle plastics first, I don't really agree with that approach. I think it's better to keep the scope broad for the same reasons that Rachel has mentioned about the unfortunate fact that this is focused on plastic packaging. I would actually agree that I'd like to see it across packaging generally, but that's not how it is at the moment. But I definitely wouldn't want to then carve it out into hard to recycle plastics only. So trying to keep it as broad as possible.
The problem there, if you don't mind me jumping in, is that if you focus on the stuff that we already know can be recycled on shore, is already collected on shore, and we're working on improving, is that you're at some form or other there's going to be an advanced recycling fee or something built into the system that adds cost to that packaging, and people will look for alternatives. If there's another option that is not recyclable but doesn't have a fee on it and it's a similar cost, then people are very likely to go with that. While in the ideal world, the environment rules, we are talking business people here, and money matters.
That's why you want to keep that scope broad so everything is captured within it. So again, if we were to include all packaging types, so you're not seeing the shift from single-use plastics to single-use something else, that would be ideal, because you're then leveling that playing field between the different packaging types. But yeah.
And that kind of segues into the next question that we had, is how do you practically tackle this at the top of the waste hierarchy? What are the implications for each of you in the waste industry? Maybe Hannah, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical that we are looking at focusing on following the waste hierarchy. The waste hierarchy should be treated like a funnel, not like a ladder where you start at the bottom and work up. And so, like I said, it's unfortunate that plastic packaging is the only thing being looked at, because it may be that solutions higher up the hierarchy are looking at different materials. But I think still within that, you're wanting to look at that reduce and that redesign element. Having things like plastic consumption reduction targets can, it's in terms of single-use, fees on single-use items, deposit return systems, that can then pivot towards reusable packaging systems, whether they're plastic or not. They may be, they may not be. And so, creating that more of a level playing field between single-use and reuse, you can still do that with a limited scope, even if it's a bit trickier. But it is critical that these targets that the government sets, they need to be binding. So we need to see this product stewardship scheme bringing in binding targets and backed up by regulation, and including minimum recycled content for packaging, so that we're actually closing the packaging loop as well, is really critical if we're looking at circular economy for packaging.
Kelly, do you want to have a go at answering that?
Yeah, so I guess I just bring in New Zealanders and the user again. So, what are New Zealand households having to deal with in terms of plastic packaging? What do Kiwis actually need and use? And how can they, in the everyday lives, have behaviour change that can actually support that waste hierarchy as well? So, it's not all about the single-use packaging. We actually do need to be able to take a step back and actually see what we're trying to achieve here, and if there's opportunity for product redesign and reformulation, where packaging can actually be reduced, that can be hopefully incentivised through some levers that we have in the government as well. So I guess, yeah, putting the user back there, so user experience through that co-design process, I think is super, super important. What are Kiwis actually going to do with this packaging when they get it home? We just really need to think about that and make the message as simple as possible so they can put it in the right place as well. Cool.
Excellent. Rachel, what are your thoughts on tackling this at the top of the waste hierarchy?
Yeah, totally agree with Kelly there about that user voice at the table as being quite essential, because it doesn't matter if we fix every other part of the system if the consumer doesn't know what to do with it at the end. We've got a problem. But in terms of the waste hierarchy, I mean, best practice review of any packaging design is actually going to incorporate both life cycle thinking and review of the waste hierarchy. So, that first step is asking, is the packaging actually necessary or not? In some cases it won't be and can be completely eliminated. Actually having a look at whether a reuse or refill system could be used instead of the single-use packaging, and how that would work. So actually working through that process as people are designing their packaging is a good idea. I'd also like to actually see a bit of, I think as Hannah mentioned, incentivisation for reuse and refill coming out of the product stewardship co-design process, and actually how we can make some of that work through that system. We do need to consider, though, that we are an island nation. We've got an awful lot of product that's imported into our shores, which requires some form of packaging or protection for, food safety, that sort of thing. Reusable packaging in a global supply chain is probably a long way off, and it may never actually be practical when you've got imbalances between imports and exports. So, we are going to have to look at that bigger picture at some point. And we've also got a society that's firmly hooked into a consumption mindset. So it's going to take a while to actually shift that mindset and increase the reuse and refill. We need to be working on it, but that's probably a longer journey than actually sorting out some of the recycling infrastructure and the basic design change on some of the single-use packaging.
Awesome, thanks very much, Rachel. So we've probably got time for one quick question that if you could each answer pretty quickly. If MFE are listening to this discussion, what one thing would you like them to take on board for the priority product? Maybe Hannah, would you like to start?
Yeah, just love MFE to think about the importance of government leading this particular product stewardship design process, having a wide stakeholder representation at the table, and also engaging with that concept that, okay, we've defined the priority product as plastic packaging, but looking beyond plastic as a material type in terms of solutions and beyond single use as well needs to be built into that scheme somehow.
Awesome. Rachel, what's your thoughts?
Repeat of what Hannah's just said there, single-use packaging, not plastics packaging. But the other really big one is data. We have to have data to actually create these decisions on what's actually going to happen with all of this stuff. We don't know what's coming into the country. We really don't know where it's going in a lot of cases, and we need that information to make those investment decisions.
Awesome. And Kelly?
I was actually going to touch on the data as well. It's so important to know the scale of the problem and be able to actually make some decisions around that as part of that co-design process. I think it's really important that reusables are part of this discussion, because at the moment in the priority product declaration in the Gazette, there is a carve out for it, but we need to make sure that some of those other waste hierarchy aspects are put into the scope in the front end for co-design.
Awesome, thank you very much. Well, we've only got a little bit of time left, so I'll just take this moment just to thank all of our lovely panellists for providing their contribution today. There were some different views, which is always good. It allows for a bit of debate and hopefully will get us some good outcomes in the future. So with that, I'll like to hand us back to Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. And also to Hannah, Rachel and Kelly. Interesting discussions. So that wraps it up for today. Just a quick glimpse at tomorrow. In the Waste and Resource Recovery stream, there'll be a speaker from New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, Amanda Kane, and she'll be talking about what's happening with organics in New South Wales. Then there'll be 2 panel discussions on addressing organics and building better. The contaminated land stream will kick off with a presentation from a keynote from Dr. Dave Bull. He's from Hale Environmental, and he's talking about banning remediation, and that will also be followed by a panel discussion on how to convince risk-averse clients to manage on-site rather than remediate. Makes me think of Kim Hill saying good luck with that, but perhaps that's rather a naughty comment. Anyway, hope you've had a great day. Best is to come, of course. Networking Dwinkies. Bye all. Thank you.